All right, everybody. Why don't we go ahead and get started? It is 2 o'clock, and we have, 12 o'clock, my bad. It's 2 o'clock somewhere, just not here.
Yes, it is.
Why don't we go ahead and get started? We have a couple of policies to consider, and then hopefully we'll have a bit of a break before we jump into our 2 o'clock regular meeting. So I will call this meeting to order, and we'll go to a roll call. Dr. Nicolette?
All right, Board Policy Committee roll call. Jeff Church.
Here.
Adam Mayberry.
Here.
Ellen Minetto.
Here.
Diane Nicolette here. Joe Rodriguez.
Here.
Beth Smith.
Beth says she will be late.
Delayed. Got it. Thank you. Angela Taylor.
I'm here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
All right, fantastic. Why don't we jump into agenda item 2.01, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or for the proposed revisions of Board Policy 3051. This is about the fund balance, specifically to increase our general fund target balance to 12%. And Mr. Mather will take us through that. This is, as we know, this is our first viewing of this. Is our preliminary viewing, which, should it be approved, it will be forwarded to a future meeting for first consideration by the board. Mr. Mather?
Thank you very much, Madam President. Before you, we have this board policy, and there is only one change, and that is to increase the fund balance target for the general fund from the current range of 8 to 10% to 12%. So just as background, I know we talked a lot about fund balance when we went over strategic plan metrics a month or so ago. But this is a really important policy. It's probably our most important policy in the fiscal area. Setting the level of reserves for the district really guides a lot of the fiscal decisions we'll bring to you during the budget process that'll start in January. Kind of sets a course for kind of where we want to be in terms of those level of reserves that carry us through tough times and provide the necessary cash flows to make payroll. So it is critical. We greatly revamped this roughly 4 years ago. As some of you will recall, there were a number of new board policies in the fiscal area that we presented to the board at the time and that they approved. We most recently updated the board policy in March of this year. There were fairly minor changes to it, and at the time that we brought it to you, we were in the middle of the legislative session, and there was discussion of reductions to school district funding. And even though we noted we would like to increase the fund balance target, at that time we just didn't feel comfortable stretching that out, increasing the fund balance target when there were so many unknowns. And at the time we were also looking at kind of partial implementation of the people-centered funding plan, and there were questions about how that would all work out. So now we know how it worked out. The legislature did restore a lot of the funding that had been cut in the 2020 special session of the legislature, provided a modest amount of increased funding, and then they also fully implemented the pupil-centered funding plan, the new funding formula for school districts. And importantly, in terms of this issue, that pupil-centered funding plan eliminated the guarantee of our per pupil funding. So if there is a downturn in the economy and downturn in state revenues, either due to recession or just a correction in the markets or what have you, we would be subject to reductions in that per pupil funding from the state. If it goes below 97%, there is a mechanism where we can access a budget stabilization account at the state, but we have to all go to the interim finance committee. Right now that stabilization account is funded not greatly at $50 million, which sounds like a lot, but isn't when you consider Clark County and what they might need. So it's really prudent for us to relook at this policy in light of those changes that happened during the legislative session. As some of you also know, we've had a number of significant risk management claims that, again, are unpredictable. And as we talked about when we talked about the strategic plan, there's any number of external situations that can happen where, like COVID-19, the pandemic, where we might need to access our fund balance for one-time needs to get us through the school year. So In terms of the policy itself, I'll direct you to page 3, which states under B. So if you keep going, yeah, there you go. It states, in the event the general fund's unrestricted fund balance exceeds the target balance, the superintendent, in consultation with the CFO, will come back to the board with the following options: revising the target balance upward, not doing anything, or identifying one-time uses to draw the fund balance back down to the current fund balance target. So we have in policy a mechanism where when we're over the 8 to 10% currently, we would come back to you, which is exactly why we're here. We are above 10%. So when we crafted the 2018 board policy, we were right in the middle of 8 to 10%. We are now, as measured via this policy, right under 12%. So that necessitates, again, this conversation about what do we want to do. Do we want to increase the fund balance target? Or, again, do nothing if we are concerned about inflationary increases or just a downturn in the economy? Or, again, we can use those fund reserves for one-time purposes. Our recommendation is to increase the fund balance target to 12%. We think that's a good, important move the board can make. Shows real progress from where we were a couple years ago. And again, we face a number of uncertainties, including the lack of a per pupil guarantee now that we had before. So there's always the chance mid-year we could see a reduction in our per pupil amount from the state. They have that ability. And we wouldn't have the ability to lay off teachers, nor would we want to mid-year either. So having an adequate fund balance is really important for the stability of the district and sustainability going forward. We talked about in the staff report as well that the rating agencies certainly drill down and zero in on fund balance. That's a key measure and metric that they look at, and the direction of how that fund balance is going is something they look at, not just the level of it, but is it increasing or decreasing? So we have a good story to tell the rating agencies. But it is a commitment, and then one of the things the rating agencies look at is, are you honoring, your board, your policy, whatever that level, are you moving towards that, or, are you not? Again, we're right under 12%, so I feel real comfortable about recommending 12%. So that is the one change, really the one material change to this policy, which is on page 2. The prior page in section 1.
Okay.
So again, the recommendation is to approve an increase to our fund balance target for the unrestricted general fund balance from the range of 8 to 10% to 12%.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mather. Why don't we do we have any public comment on this, Jeannie?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's bring it here. Vice President Minetto?
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Mathers, I just have an interesting, kind of strange question. What is the highest fund balance that we could reasonably have?
So the legislation creating the pupil-centered funding plan has kind of a de facto maximum cap in law, and that is 16.6%. And so if you're a school district that was below 16.6% back when that legislation was passed, and you go above 16.6%, any excess above the 16.6% would be swept into that budget stabilization account at the state. So they would sweep it, take it, put it in the state stabilization account that could be used by all districts. So in reality, there's no legal statutory maximum, but again, because the state's going to sweep anything above 16.6%, that serves as the real world cap.
Okay. Did you have a follow-up, Vice President Minetto?
Yes. So would it be reasonable for us just to stay at 12% in the big general sense, or 14 or something? I guess I'm thinking because you don't want to get up to 16 and then have it fall over and you go, what do you do? And everything's got to go through a meeting. And
I think 12% is a nice midway point between where we were and that ultimate cap. I feel like we're in a good place where we've seen, mild surpluses in the general fund, and that's, I think, right in line with obviously where we're at today, and provides for a balanced budget, therefore, going forward.
If I may just jump in, and then I'll go to you, Trustee Mayberry. Also, 12% is the max in terms of what's protected from a negotiation standpoint. I'm jumping onto a question that Trustee Mayberry asked. Am I correct in that?
That is correct.
So that falls in line with that recommendation as well. Because additional dollars, we want to have those monies, we want to use them, right? We certainly want to, whether it's paying teachers or our staff or textbooks, whatever it is that we need it for, right? We want to be able to use that, but 12% is that max, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
There's really two caps, if you will, on fund balance, and you just talked about the second one. That's right.
Thank you. Trustee Mayberry?
Thank you, Madam President. I support this, Mark. Thank you for your work on it. Curious, 12%, how many days does that give this organization?
It's a month and a half of operating expenses. Yeah, which isn't much. The rating agencies have kind of acknowledged school districts historically can live with a lower fund balance because of state support versus other entities that are, like the cities or county that are kind of more on their own. But given the lack of per pupil guarantee now, it does behoove us to increase the fund balance target.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions, comments? I think that the questions have come forth. Certainly looking for a motion if it's the pleasure of the board. I see you leaning in, Trustee Mayberry.
Sure, I'll move.
Okay.
Good morning. I move that the Board Policy Committee forwards the proposed revision of Board Policy 3051, Fund Balance, to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
Thank you, Trustee Mayberry. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
See a second. Trustee Rodriguez, further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion is carried. Let the record show it is unanimous, 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Mathers. All right, moving on to agenda item 2.02. This is discussion and possible action to recommend the adoption. This is a new board policy. I think all of us are aware of that. Board Policy 9500, residency of a trustee. And then forward, again, the proposed policy to a future meeting to the full board. And this is that will be for preliminary consideration before it goes out for public review. And before us, we have our Chief HR Officer, Ms. Ellison.
Good afternoon. Emily Ellison, Chief Human Resources Officer for the record. As Dr. Taylor, President Taylor said, this is a new board policy, and the goal of this policy is to clarify the procedures that are to be used when a trustee changes residence during their term, and outline the steps that the district will take in order to ensure continued eligibility in the position that they were elected to serve. As you read through the policy, if you look through the first two sections, that reflects the fact that it's the responsibility of the elected official to ensure that they live within their elected district, and excuse me, and if they're going to move during their term, they need to take steps to ensure that that residence is in their district as well. From a process perspective, if a trustee moves once adopted, the expectation would be that the trustee immediately notifies the Chief Human Resources Officer, so me or whoever sits in this seat, and the board president. And it's important, I know we try not to list people in policies, but I think it actually is important that it's the Chief Human Resources Officer in this case, because if it's just human resources, I think we run the risk of someone being able to update their address through the online self-serve and say, I notified human resources.
Good point. Good point.
So that's an effort to prevent that. We will take steps to confirm their eligibility to serve, most likely by contacting the registrar of voters. If it's determined that the residence is within the elected official's district, then no further action will be taken. But if not, the board president would follow up with, or HR will notify the board president, and then the board president would contact the trustee to request a written response substantiating their residency. And in the case of no response or failure to substantiate, the trustee would be asked to resign. In the unlikely event that the trustee refuses, the information will be turned over to the district attorney's office for further investigation. In the event that the board president has a change of residency during their term, the vice president would fulfill the role of president for the purposes of this policy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ellison. Before we do anything, let's see if any public comment, Jeannie, on this.
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a couple of things. One, I'm going to ask council, if you would, on this, the if someone refuses to resign and it being turned over, is that what statute dictates, or does statute address it at all?
Yeah, no, statute doesn't dictate that you're required to do it. I assisted Ms. Ellison in drafting this, and that was a presumption on my part that that's where the board was headed.
Mm-hmm.
So if a trustee refuses, if a trustee changed his or her residency outside of his or her district and refused to resign, then it gives the board president the authority to turn the matter over to the DA, who's responsible for, and you got the opinion today on 283-040, I think it is, or 060. But it would be the DA's responsibility then to effectuate the action. So there's really, so that is not state law, that is the policy, but it would be, that's how the change would occur.
Okay.
It's through an action of the DA.
Okay, because just as a reminder we as a board don't have the authority to remove someone. The people remove someone, or if there's a legal issue. But if the voters put somebody in, then that person serves until the voters have a change of mind, if they do, unless some of these other things, which is still outside of the body. The only comment I have on this, and I know Trustee Church, you emailed something to me, and so I'll go to you, and I also see Dr. Nicolette. I would say on the when we say immediately notify HR, I would love to see a time limit around there. You know, within 30 days or something, whatever the board would, because immediately can be like, you know, I mean, it's what, you know, it's one of those, like, you know, I kind of mentioned, I'd love to see something to kind of define what that might be. Additionally, when it says, if there is an issue, the trustee has moved outside of his or her district, and then you share that information with the board president, and then the board president shall immediately, I would like to see a time limit around that, you know, within 5 working days or something like that. And that's not because the board president would drag his or her feet. I don't think that they would, but that's an issue as we're dealing with the situation that we're all in right now, as you know. And I think to say, okay, you know what, 3 working days, 5, whatever it is we decide, right? That's reasonable is reasonable. So let's take all of that drama off the table. So those would be my 2 recommendations on this for my colleagues to consider. If we put some time limit around, put some time. And I shouldn't say limit, a time range, if you will, or something like that around the immediately, so we can define that. I mean, I'm in full support of the policy, though. Thank you, Trustee Church, and then Dr. Oh, now I also want to say this came forward because Dr. Nicolette actually brought it to the board leadership team, and that's how this came forward. So thank you for bringing that forward. And you had 2 of us being 2s. It's like this makes sense. We should take this step. So thank you, Dr. Nicolette. Were you going to respond? Did I see a hand or?
I'm just putting it up there.
Oh, just putting it on the board. Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, those 2 recommendations I made is something we can take a look at them for consideration. And why don't we take this little by little, right? That's how we typically do it instead of looking at a whole. Thank you very much. So, is there a motion to that effect?
Can I comment on that one?
Oh, on this one? Oh, yes, sir.
So we're talking about the immediacy issue?
Yes.
I would think maybe the terminology to in no case later than the next board meeting. In other words, we would want them to tell us before the next board meeting.
Well, the only reason I say not that, if you will, is because if I move on Monday, I might not even have had an opportunity to do that on. And hopefully, and let's make this very clear. We know that we're dealing with this now. We've dealt with this now. But we know how rare this is. Right? I mean, it just doesn't. That's why digging through it and finding out what's in statute and yada yada is a little bit of a challenge. And so what? And I don't look as a person who just moved, right? Within my district, within my. Did I? Everybody got that? Okay, good. On the record within. But as a person who just moved, I think that just depending upon that makes it a little bit unreasonable, because generally speaking, for the most part, an elected official is going to take a look at that, generally speaking, for the most part, and then know that to be the case. But that's my comment on that. But I hear you. You want it so that there's an issue, they don't get to vote on stuff.
Yeah,
I
we
hear
don't
you.
want to taint and void a meeting.
I hear you. There's also, however, statute around this, if I'm correct, about it's a 30-day period of time anyway.
It doesn't taint or void the meeting if they're not inside their district, pursuant to the opinion of the person that you've hired, not from, I opine that as well, but that's the Gunderson law firm, just to be clear.
Right, there's that 30-day, right, that's based upon that, you have that 30-day period, so it wouldn't do that anyway. I hear you, though, because we don't want, not only because it may taint or cancel the meeting, we don't want people voting, they should vote. Right? On this, before I go to Dr. Nicolette? Yes, sir.
On this, so how about we put within 5 working days or prior or before the next meeting, whichever is first?
They before they immediately notify the,
So like no more than 5 working days or before the next board meeting, whichever comes first.
whatever's the pleasure of the board. I mean,
Because I think that covers both tracks, I think, but.
yeah, it's going to be a 30-day period anyway.
Right.
Right? So, but it truly is whatever it's the pleasure of the board. Like I said, as a person who just moved, you got a whole lot of stuff you're doing.
Right. I think it is right for the board and for the people to know that, like, hey, just so you know, I moved and may or may not be in my district, but at least.
No, there shouldn't be a may or may not be in my district. Let's make that really clear.
It shouldn't be, but we've all experienced this, but, just a thought.
Again, it's the pleasure. More commentary, Vice President Manetto?
Yeah, I think it should be the 30 days, and the reason why is because it can take you, just because I just got this new place, doesn't mean I moved in yet. It takes time to get your stuff in, it takes time to, and I think 30 days for that part might be reasonable.
Well,
But
right, again, it's up for some
because-
conversation. Trustee Church?
The one point I want to make, and I was going to hold it till later, but it does relate to this. I actually sat through an entire trial of a candidate over this very issue of residency. As defined, as we're going to see later today, residency is not clear cut. Essentially, and I'm not a lawyer, but it manifests, what the intent of the individual is manifested where he or she plans to or does reside or whatever. For example, if a house burns down and you move out of your district to a hotel and it takes 6 months, my understanding of that particular Judge Flanagan's interpretation, which is not an appellate court, but that person clearly intended to come back to their burned out house, but it might take more than somebody, and they're living at a residence inn outside of their district. I can see that. Now, the case we're dealing with the former trustee, that's pretty cut and dried. But I can definitely see this would be the more likely issue that we would face. So I just want to put that on the record when we're talking about how we're going to word this, in whether we're talking about the immediacy or overall. And I was going to hold it till later, but that's why I think residency should kind of be defined somewhere in here.
Well, and just as a response to that is, in this policy, it says that the trustee will have 30 days, this trustee has to do a written reply. So let's say, for an example, trustee A moves outside of their district and notifies HR, the chief HR officer, I've moved, and then chief HR looks it up, calls the registrar's office, oh my goodness, this trustee is out of their district, notifies the president, according to this policy, right? Then the president notifies that trustee, hey, trustee, according to the registrar's office, that's outside your district. That is when that trustee in your situation, right, which is certainly could happen, right? That is when that trustee says, oh my goodness, yeah, you know what? I had a fire, right? And my house, yada, 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 and they're rebuilding it, and it's going to take 3 months or whatever, which the statute is 30 days. And then that's when that's when that would apply. Because that's how that is dealt with. And you look up, oh, you know what? That's the intent. And it gets into some of the other legal issues that you just mentioned, Trustee Church. Because that could happen. Okay, yes. So we're still on this piece before. I know you may have had another comment, Dr. Nicolette. Is it relating to this? So we're really looking at the time frame when that trustee must notify the Chief Human Resources Officer. That's the piece that we're dealing with right now. Yes.
Yes, it is. It does relate to that. It's just really, the policy is suggesting, if you will, that if I move, no matter where I move, I should inform the Chief Human Resources Officer and the Board President. It really doesn't say what's going to happen after that unless there's the communication drops and there seems to be some kind of stubborn behavior. And then we move on to other authorities. So in this case, I believe this time frame absolutely works, because if my house burns down and I move down with my son who's in District F, then I inform you, and I inform you of the circumstances, I would assume that that would be okay. Because I'm going to use a term that I'm not sure I fully understand, and maybe General Counsel can help. This is a non-self-executing. There's nothing that executes really us to do anything here. So I think this works and it keeps it simple. And extenuating circumstances, we could go on and on with how many those might be.
So that's towards 5 working days?
Yep.
Okay, so still looking for a motion? If that's the pleasure of the board, whichever way we go with that, we're taking these step by step.
I
Make that motion?
I move that we include, but no more than 5 working days in Section 3 and in Section 3C within 5 working days.
Okay.
Second.
There's a second motion on the floor, Dr. Nicolette, seconded by Trustee Rodriguez. Further discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? All right, the motion carries. Let the record show it is unanimous. We'll make that change, and then we're moving on. Dr. Nicolette, you had a hand up. I don't know if they was looking for a different change. I know it was a while ago. Sorry.
May I think for a moment?
Yes, you may. If there's further discussion, Trustee Church?
As I mentioned before, I do think a definition of residency, since we're not attorneys, should be included in the policy, because again, it's not as clear as we think it is. And I really don't see the matter of somebody literally moving outside a district as much as somebody who is temporarily displaced for whatever reason. The second thing, I have to ask, rather than have a new policy that adds to the many, many policies, is there nowhere in the 9100 series that we could put this as a sub-part? And then the third thing is the last sentence about what happens. That would be 3F, page 2, 3F. And this is pretty important. I would lean towards saying, instead of the district attorney, saying the Washoe County District Attorney, the Secretary of State, and or the Attorney General, and perhaps even Nevada Ethics Commission, and or other agencies as appropriate. I'd like to handcuff ourselves that we couldn't seek help also from the Secretary of State or Attorney General, if appropriate. And then further, I really would like to see something, nothing herein prohibits the district from taking other internal civil or administrative actions.
Okay, so let's go back. We're going to take those one at a time.
Already?
Just stay with your first one.
Residency.
Okay, so what's your recommendation for definition? You have one?
I'm not
you know I'm going to come back to you for
I
recommendation.
knew you were.
You know how I am.
I knew you were, and number one, that's definitely a question for legal, not for me, but I believe it is included more or less in the report we're going to be reviewing later today.
Okay, is there a part of that report that pulled out that makes you that you want to say, hey, how about we include this?
I don't have it in front of me. I think it really would be more for legal.
In terms of the definite, any consideration to what residency means when you guys are pulling this together?
I didn't put it in the policy because it's defined by statute.
Okay, there
I
it is.
think we waste so much language in policy redefining things that are already required of you. For example, if you've noticed, whenever we come forward with policies that say this public body will comply with the open meeting law, well, even if you don't put that in your policy,
You
guess
have to
what?
apply with
You
the
have to
open meeting
comply
law.
with the open meeting law.
Right.
So we take out terms that are redundant. So it's already in the statute, and I don't think it's And I don't think this board has the authority to adopt anything different or to change it. And so that's why it's not in there.
Okay.
If you want it in there, we can put it in there, but that's why it's not in there.
Well, I hear that. I think go ahead, Trustee Church.
Yeah, if I can read from the report later today, which I guess is okay, stop me if it's not.
I think it's okay. It's public record.
The legal counsel there states, and I'm trying to find it, the standard for determining a person's legal residence is long, nuanced, complex, and ultimately requires an analysis of the person's intent. Yes. So it's not easily spelled out in NRS 281. As I sat through that trial, I learned that firsthand. It is complex and requires an analysis of the person's intent. So I don't know how to address that. Other than it goes on, I won't read the whole paragraph, but it gives an entire ABC paragraph that addresses that. So I'm thinking we would want to put something in there involving the intent.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Church. Ms. Ellison?
The only comment that I would make is that knowing it is nuanced and very situation specific, I think there's some risk in putting a definition of having an individual trustee read the definition and interpret for themselves that this policy doesn't apply, and then say, well, I didn't think that this change was a residency change, so I didn't think this policy applied. I think there's advantage in having it be broader, and basically just say to the trustees, if you're moving, you have to tell the district within this timeline, and not get into the business of having an individual try and assess whether or not they meet the definition for residency and a change has happened.
One thing I might add in that is certainly I think that we're in our safest place by falling on, so to speak, or relying upon how it's defined in statute, even if that's argued in court, right? Which apparently is continuing to be ongoing. But if we fall back on what the state law says, then that's the safest place for us to be, because we can't be outside of state law anyway. And then that way, if there is a change, because it goes up to a higher court and they make a different decision and so on, it doesn't make something void or something like that within our policy. I have a higher level of comfort and relying upon what statute says, even if we say we're going to rely upon what statute says, for my own individual piece. So I think Dr. Nicholas Knight was on first, and then we'll go to you, Trustee Church.
I'd just like to say that in this conversation here, I think the purpose is very clear, and I think it addresses the concept of intent. And so I thank everyone for working on that. And what I really want to point out is the collaboration that is really between the person who might move and the board president and the board and human resources, because I believe that closes the loop in helping each other and in the ensuring that the trustee lives in their district. So I think this is really well written. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nicolette. Trustee Church?
Yeah, I respectfully disagree, because I think our HR person here hit it on the head. That let me give you an example. Somebody we find out 2 years ago or 1 year ago they changed their residence and they're living with their mother, and we go, you didn't tell us. Well, I don't have to tell you. I intend to come back. I don't pay rent there anymore. I moved out of my apartment, but my mother's. So it gives a giant loophole. It almost renders the policy void, because it gives a giant loophole to say, well, I never reported it because I intend to come back.
Well, I think actually the policy says you have to report it, period. The policy doesn't say, but if you intend to go back, don't report it. That's not what the policy says. The policy says you have to report. I think it actually closes that loophole, just based upon that piece. And I would also like, and hopefully it is addressed in this. This is also the same for appointed trustees as well. Mm-hmm. When we're looking at those who may be appointed and living in the district and so on, I think saying if you move, you have to report it. I think is what the intention is. And then any of the legalities that may continue to come up over time, people may continue to challenge this in court for various reasons and yada, yada, yada. This stays in alignment with that. And I think that's the intention. of that piece. So we're going to Trustee Rodriguez and then Vice President Manello. Oh, I'm sorry. Legal wanted to weigh in. I'm sorry. You said that earlier. My bad.
No problem. Yeah, with regard to this debate over residents and whether or not you intended and stuff, that you hit the nail on the head, President Taylor. That's exactly why we agreed to put in which is almost it's not an appeal. I don't want to call it that but the trustee who moves is then required to file a response with the president substantiating that their residency is still within their district. So it's incumbent upon them. It's not incumbent upon this board or this district to make sure that you, as an elected official, do your job. So you need to substantiate why you're within your district under 281.050. And if you don't substantiate it, then the president turns you over to the DA. If you do substantiate it, then it problem solved.
And we have the record of it and so on, which should remain with HR, because I think that's important as well. Thank you, Counsel. Trustee Rodriguez?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Sure.
So,
And then we can, then after a second, discussion can occur. Absolutely.
I move that the Board Policy Committee moves forward proposed adoption of Board Policy 9500, residency of trustee, to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration, preliminary approval.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll have a discussion. I think that perhaps we might want to say on number one. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, we might want to say on number one, is it the responsibility of a trustee to reside in the trustee's district for which the trustee was elected or appointed?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes.
I'm just saying that because we have three appointed trustees on the board. So.
Right.
And two of us who've also been appointed the other time. So I think that is the intention. You okay with that for a friendly?
I am. So.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Was there other commentary on this? You were going to say something else? Yeah. All right. Any other commentary on this? Okay, Trustee Church.
Well, I have discussion on the overall policy. Is that what we're talking about?
Oh yeah, this is. Oh yeah, you still have a. You know what? Continue. I'm sorry, you had some other points you wanted to make. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Number two.
Because I wasn't sure if his motion was.
It was for the entire policy, but you're right. You had some other things that we need to get that out there. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think the most.
So we're in discussion, so you're okay.
The most important part is that page 2-3F. Why are we handcuffing ourselves to say the district attorney if he or her doesn't do their duties? Why don't we say, again, DA, Secretary of State, AG, Ethics Commission, and/or other agency as appropriate, and then further, nothing herein prohibits the district from taking further internal action, civil or administrative actions. For example, censure. That way, at least we go, hey, we censured him. Or we could bring a civil action. I mean, why would we handcuff ourselves to not include that?
Well, why don't we take one of those at a time?
Sure.
Okay, the first one is that you would like to go beyond the county district attorney's office. So I'll just ask counsel, if I may, was there consideration to that being because if law dictates that's the appropriate place to take it, then that's the appropriate place we take it.
For a lawsuit to exist, the issue must not be moot or ripe. The party must have standing, and there must be a case in controversy. By state law, the only person who has standing to do anything about the residency issue, which is what this is the Washoe County District Attorney's Office. Mm-hmm. If this board felt that the Washoe County District Attorney's Office failed to do its job, you would not be turning over the issue of the trustee of residency to the Attorney General. You would be asking the Attorney General to have issue with the DA's office for failure to do their job, and you would be asking them to take their place. That is not what this is. This is how you get the person removed. So, and Secretary of State and the Register of Voters have attorneys, and those attorneys are the Attorney General and or the Washoe County DA. So even if you turn it over to the Secretary of State, it's going to go to the AG. If you turn it over to the Register of Voters, it's going to go to the DA. So the DA is the only person who has standing by statute, by law, to do this. With regard to censure, just because this policy says this is what you're going to do doesn't mean you can't censure. It doesn't. I don't see the limiting language, but if you want to change that, I don't care. I mean, but it's not limited. You can still censure the person.
Okay. So we're going to stay with that first piece, and that it being it seems like no matter which other place it may go, it's going to still end up with the DA's office. Okay, Vice President Manetto?
Thank you, Madam President. I think there's got to be an element of trust amongst us to trust that a person who's elected by intelligent people in Washoe County is going to go, oh my goodness, I really blew it, and take care of this. And I know that there are people who won't do that, but there's got to be an element of trust in this as it is pretty much, I think, inclusive. And we don't need to add more length to any of our policies. I love two-page policies. Thank you for this wonderful two-page policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Manetto. So on the first issue then being, because we're going to take them one at a time, all right, Trustee Church? The first issue being, do we go beyond the district attorney's office? It doesn't seem as though there's much agreement that should be there, because it sounds as though that based upon law, it ends up there anyway. And if they don't do something, then the law allows us to do something else, to say, hey, AG, can you make them do something? Which is basically what that, and that's already in law. That's what it sounds like, right? Yep. Now your second piece, Trustee Church, let's go to that one.
On the first piece, just for the record,
okay.
I thought I heard counsel say Secretary of State, and which I thought he'd said earlier in previous meetings, and that goes to the Attorney General, not to the District Attorney. But moving on from that.
Well, no, stay there. No, stay there. He did say that. He actually said it just now. Yeah. But then he also said then the AG's office would go to the DA.
Well, that's an assumption.
That's in law.
That's in the law. It's not an assumption. They don't have a choice. They don't have standing. Again, to have a lawsuit, there are three things that are required: a ripe issue, a case in controversy, and standing. By statute, the only person that has standing for a county position is the county district attorney. And I will tell you, as a former elected DA, I didn't even know that. I mean, it's just such a never used statute, but it was fascinating to read that. I have actually did the last quo warranto action in the state under Attorney General Sandoval of a state issue, and that's how I knew it was the AG. But then it turns out for counties, it's the DA. It's by law. It's not a debate.
Okay. Okay, so you go ahead. Your next point, Trustee Church?
Yeah, I just feel it's better to have a section that makes clear in policy that nothing in there prohibits us from taking internal action.
Okay, that's up for this consideration for the board. Board, feedback? It seems as though, I mean, I think if censure would be something that we would want to say, then that would probably go to Board Policy 9051. Board Policy 9051 takes us down that road. It's already inherent. If someone is violating board policies, which they would be, because that's the board policy, these are the steps that are taken. And at this point, those steps have been taken. The president has gone to that person, right? So those steps have been taken. The only other step in there that would not have been taken was everyone saying, "Hey, look, I agree to go back to adhere to the policies." Otherwise, that's already inherent. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's already inherent in Board Policy 9051, and would still lead to censure. Because I do think it would be important if trustee whatever said, no, I don't live in my district and I don't care, right? For the board, not the district, by the way, Trustee Church, it would be the board, right? Because the board, we govern ourselves. The district does not govern us. We govern ourselves. It would be appropriate for the board to say, well, shoot, we got to do something. And then that's when we fall on the behavior policy that we have, which is 9051.
And 9051 says if you violate a policy, you can be censured for it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you violate 9051 or 500, which is this one,
Mm-hmm.
then you can be censured for it.
Mm-hmm. It falls in line with that. That doesn't mean something else couldn't be said, but I'm just saying it isn't. We aren't uncovered in that, Trustee Church. Vice President. I'm sorry, Clerk Nicolette.
I'm trying to understand where you're coming from, Trustee Church. What my thought is censure doesn't really get us any place because the person could still vote. So censure, a slap on the hand, doesn't really get us to where I think we'd want to be, and that is if someone knowingly moves out of their district and there's no extenuating circumstances that a compassionate person would understand, and they say, I know I'm sitting here, I can sit here, censure doesn't really do anything because they can still come and they can still vote. So we would have to do something more, and I think this policy just helps us lay the groundwork for helping each of us and those who come after us understand you have a responsibility to know where you live.
I mean, I would say this, just in support of where I think Trustee Church is trying to go, is that censure may not remove the person, so to speak, but it does say, hey, as a board, we don't think that's okay. And I think that's the point that you're trying to make, Trustee Church. Hey, at least we said, hey, we don't like it. We don't think it's okay. And then the other things come in. So it's not because it gets us where we want to go, but I think Trustee Church's point is, hey, we want to say, we still want to at least let the public know and let each other know, hey, this is not okay.
Yeah, a two-prong answer. Number one, my understanding of censure as a non-attorney is that it creates somewhat of a defense if we were ever to face liability or lawsuit on why we didn't remove the person or take further action. Second of all, I was very clear to say other administrative actions. And again, in my brain, that could be 2 or 3 other things, but the one thing I was thinking, we might want to sue them and say, so that we get a faster action from a judge where we don't have to give them any more money. And, so that I was very careful to say other administrative actions.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Church. Trustee Mayberry?
No, I guess there's a comment in there somewhere, but the genesis of this obviously was the trustee that sat in this seat prior to my arrival, right? That's where we are. So I think it's very succinct. I mean, I appreciate the discussion we've had, but I think this does the job for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. Other counsel, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, before
Then we get to a vote.
Before the board votes, I can't make motions, but I am going to suggest that, and I just caught this on paragraph 2, if a trustee moves residence or changes address. This way it removes that argument of, well, I don't think I did move my residence. It makes it even broader to get a catch-all. And if you look, Emily and I did that throughout the whole policy. We put residence or address except for then that paragraph. So I'm going to ask that somebody make that friendly motion to add if a trustee moves residence or changes address. This way, if you move with your mom, I think was the example, you got to tell HR.
Well, it gives us a bigger net
Exactly.
to catch any of that. And I think we're really trying to catch as much as, that's part of the problem. We're trying to catch as much as we can, but we can hopefully give ourselves an umbrella where we can. The motion, I think, was made by Trustee Rodriguez. You're okay with that friendly? Yes. Dr. Nicolette, you were the second?
I am. I just want clarification. We're looking at number 3.
Number 2.
You just wrote it up there. I just put it up there.
Oh, thank you. And then again, if number 3, if you look at B and C, do we want to add or address new residence or change his address in B
It
and
says
C?
or address. If the new residence or address. If the new residence or address is in both 2 and 3.
So we're not going to be adding change of address.
That's in number 2. Now, his recommendation is the friendly on number 2. If a trustee moves residence or changes address, is what the recommendation is on number 2.
Okay. And so it would read just like in number 3.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
No, I think that's a great catch. It's it's on the screen for those who may. I certainly think that's the spirit of this. Okay, seems like we're good on discussion. Nothing new, so we'll go ahead and call for the question. All those in favor of accepting the policy as amended and moving it forward to the meeting of the full board of trustees, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition?
Nay.
Okay, let the record show the motion carries 5-1. Okay? Yeah, 5-1, because Beth isn't here. Okay, this is easy math. This is easy math, Madam Superintendent. This is easy math. I got this one. I got Mark is gone. That math I might need some help on, but this one I got. All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Miss Ellison. Appreciate it. Good policy, and thank you again, Dr. Nicolette, for bringing us forward. All right. Yep, no, it's good. This is good to have. Do we have any further public comment, Jeannie?
Not on this item.
Okay, no, not on this one. This is on the agenda. We're about to close out the meeting.
Oh, yes.
We do, okay.
Jeff Church.
Oh, okay, trustee Church.
And pass these.
I'll let you get back to start my time, but hopefully I won't.
Get your mic on.
Good afternoon. I haven't been here in a while at the podium here, but for the record, Jeff Church. I did hand out a policy question issue that has been brought up to me. You have it in your handouts. A bit concerned about how I best present this, so I thought maybe today at the board policy meeting there was a need to put it on the record. Essentially, we want to avoid any kind of open meeting law issues in the future, and so some research was done that I'm presenting to you as far as the duties of the board during board meetings as well as the duties of the president. There does appear to be some conflicts that I have articulated in there, so I'll just leave those with you to read, to ponder, and do with what you will. But I thought it was important that these go on the record. I'm not trying to be antagonistic. I definitely look forward to fence mending, resolving these issues, but I just want to avoid any kind of policy or open meeting law. And as I spell out in those policies, there's a number of them that seem to have been relegated, or correction, have been established by the board after rigorous board policy meetings where we all know the procedure. That's why we're here today. We have the policy. It goes back to the public for comment. It's all done at open meeting law. No decisions are made behind closed doors. So I wanted to raise those concerns to you, and I sure appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment?
The board received one email public comment from Haley Hinkle.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. We are now calling, just for the record, we'll show that Trustee Smith just arrived just in time for public comment and dismissal. Okay, our meeting is adjourned. And then our next meeting of the policy committee is on January 18th. January 18th. All right? Okay. We're adjourned. We'll be back here at 2 o'clock for our our regular meeting of the Board of Trustees.